So hello and welcome back to another week of exploring Azeroth. Except I really do need to make a new opening card for this because this week we are using Onyx instead of Beryl. Mostly because Onyx has never been in the Sunken Temple and that is where we're going. So I thought it would be a good thing to have Beryl's sister Onyx go and run through the Sunken Temple. And this week I'm doing it a little bit different. I'm going with a voiceover, and I recorded my run with Onyx through the Sunken Temple. And then, amazingly enough, I actually did a little bit more research on this one. So maybe I'll get my facts right and actually not flub everything, although I will probably still butcher every last name because that is what I am good at. So without further ado, let's just go into the temple and see what is up. So the Sunken Temple, or the Temple of Atal'Hakkar, is a Atali troll shrine to their blood loa Hakkar the Soul Flayer. And that is Lord Ithras. He is one of the Green Dragon flight who did not stay inside the Sunken Temple because over 1,000 years ago, the Green Dragons, led by the dragon aspect Ysera, learned that the Atali trolls were planning on bringing back their blood god Hakkar. And so Ysera and her green dragon flight attacked the temple and partially sunk it. They thought that that would be enough, but in an abundance of caution, they left a flight of dragons, and Ysera left her consort, Arrakis, and I probably said his name wrong, to guard the temple just to make sure that the Atali would not come back and never again attempt to summon their blood god. So right now we are in the Hall of Masks. It is named for the giant skull masks. Nobody really knows its purpose, but they pretty much know it probably wasn't good with that big sacrifice-looking pit in the bottom. Now, I never noticed before how much of the temple you can explore that's not the dungeon, so that's what we're going to do first, after we check out those giant troll masks that line the walls. It's kind of cool. Also, I don't know if you know this, but the Sunken Temple is probably one of the best high-level leather farming areas in the classic World of Warcraft zones. You can get so much good leather here. I used to do it all the time. Alright, the first spot we're going to stop that is not in the dungeon is the butchery. The butchery is where captive green dragons that were unworthy of being sacrificed to Hakkar were killed and fed to the troll serpents. Not really a great fate for the mighty green dragons. Then we just have the Den of the Caller. Kazkaz the Unholy is one of the big priests of this temple, and that's just the rooms where he lives when he's not out there preaching. Right there is his altar in the Chamber of Blood, which is basically the trolls' unholy church, where Kazkaz presides over offerings of blood, because it is blood that will bring, according to them, Hakkar the Soul Flayer back into Azeroth. And that would be a really bad thing. It's kind of funny because the Hakkar that you end up calling here in the Temple of Hakkar is not actually the true Loa Hakkar. It's just the avatar of Hakkar, which is a good thing because the real Hakkar real in air quotes, was kind of inadvertently responsible for the World of Warcraft's own little plague situation that, interestingly enough, did end up getting studied by the CDC when the Rona hit, because the World of Warcraft players inadvertently became sort of a case study in the way that people respond to a plague situation. So that's kind of an interesting little thing. But evidently, Hakkar's blood in World of Warcraft was just as potent as any disease organism out here in the real world. I just thought that was interesting. There's a lot of articles about the corrupted blood plague, and yeah, it makes for some absolutely fascinating reading. But yeah, that was me just kind of messing with Jamalan the Prophet, who we will see inside the dungeon, but you can kind of sort of give him a halfway kill right there. Doesn't really count though, because we're not inside the dungeon yet, unfortunately. You know, I don't think that I ever did the original Sunken Temple back in before it was revamped in Cataclysm. I know we did a lot of interesting dungeons, but I don't think the guild I was in then did this one, or if we did, I've blanked it from my mind, because this used to be one of the largest dungeons in World of Warcraft, and if you remember anything about classic World of Warcraft, pretty much all of the dungeons in Classic were ginormous. They were, in fact, some of the dungeons in Classic World of Warcraft were actually bigger than raids. So yeah, that's, I do remember we went through a lot of dungeons, but I don't think we went through this one. Or, like I said, if we did, I've blotted it from my mind because it was probably pretty bad. From what I understand, it was a very long and difficult dungeon. Alright, so here we are, back in the Hall of Masks, where the entrance to the Temple of Atal'Hakkar waits. And there's Lord Ithras again. He's going to give...
Can I assist you?
Onyx several quests and give a little bit of the history of the Sunken Temple. Like I said, Ysera, after she and her green dragon flight razed the temple and partially sunk it beneath the waves, she left Arrakis and a contingent of her green dragons to guard the temple, and none of them knew that the Emerald Nightmare was going to subtly corrupt them within a few years.
Till next we meet.
So, with the Emerald Nightmare subtly corrupting the dragon flight, later on, when the descendants of the Atali trolls returned to the temple, they found those dragons vulnerable. The trolls finished what the nightmare began, and they corrupted the very guardians that were left to stop them.
Good luck, friend.
And that was never a good thing. So, like I said, the first thing that he wants you to do is to go and kill the avatar of the blood god Hakkar. But before we do that, like I said, Onyx is not a leather worker, and I kind of regret not bringing a leather worker, because you can get a lot of, for classic, high-level leatherworking recipes, and a lot of really good leather in here. Not only can you get green dragon scales, which you need in a lot of the high-level leather armor, but you can also get heavy and rugged leather, and a lot of it. So, if you're a leather worker, this is the place to hang out. Not even kidding on that one. Alright, so we are coming up on the Avatar of Hakkar. We just have to do a little bit of a summoning. But first, we should definitely take care of the trash mobs around Hakkar's altar. Now, the Avatar of Hakkar is the immortal presence of Hakkar the Soulflayer. Like I said, he is the blood god of the Atali trolls. And what they were doing was taking little bits of his corrupted blood and injecting it into the dragons that were already slightly corrupted by the Emerald Knight. And then doing that, getting great quantities of Hakkar the Soulflayer's blood, hoping to bring him back into the world. And yeah, it's a plot line that kind of ends up in Zul'Gurub, which is I don't remember if it's a raid or a dungeon now. It was a very high-level raid back in the olden days. So we're going to loop around, go back into the Pit of Sacrifice, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is where they would make the sacrifices to their blood god, as is evidenced by all of the skeletons every which way. It's filled with corrupted green dragons and corrupted whelplings. I always feel kind of bad killing the whelplings. They're very cute. After you kill the Avatar of Hakkar, you need to take out the 4 dragons of the dream. I looked and I looked and I looked, and I honestly did not find much about Hazaz, Morphaz, the Weaver, and Dream Scythe. They're 4 of Arraknis's trusted, mature dragons who were in there to help him guard, but I couldn't find much lore on them, so I'm really curious if anybody knows of any lore associated with them outside of being mini-bosses in the Sunken Temple. I am definitely up for learning that, because I just couldn't find a whole heck of a lot. Unfortunately, because I do love dragons. They're kind of awesome. But yeah, you go ahead and you take out a couple of the dragons, and then it is on to kill Jamalan the Prophet. Take care of a few more whelps and a few more nightmare scalebanes. And head back to where Jamalan is kind of having his little services back here, presiding over the sacrifice of a lot of green dragons, and probably a lot of trolls, if we've learned anything through the Battle for Azeroth, Drazara lore campaigns. It is that the trolls are not shy about sacrificing their own. But yeah, as you can see, it's almost set up like a church, just not a church I'd want to go to. You also have to watch out if you're doing this dungeon at level. These little ghosts, as you kill some of these trolls, will follow you around. They will hurt you, and they are completely immune to anything you can do to them. So now thinking about that, I think I actually did do this, because I remember being killed by shades like that, although I don't think this is the only dungeon that they were ever used in. But yeah, once you take care of all of his, what would you call them, disciples, it's time to go on to Jamalan the Prophet and Ogun the Wretched. Ogun is pretty easy to take out.
The Soulflayer comes!
Kind of just bodyguard. He's an undead. He's not much to deal with. Jamalan, on the other hand, is the spiritual leader of the Atali, and he truly believes that through Hakkar's blood, the Atali trolls will become immortal. Now, it looks like we killed him here, but I can almost guarantee that we will see him again in Zul'Gurub. But with all of them being taken care of, it is time for one last duty, and that is Arrakis. The consort, the dragon aspect, Ysera. He was the second strongest green dragon in the Green Dragon Flight. And unfortunately, the Green Dragon Flight spends a lot of time in the Emerald Dream. And the Emerald Dream, unfortunately, can be corrupted by the Emerald Nightmare. And poor Arrakis fell to the Nightmare and to the corrupted blood. And we do have to put him down here in the temple, which is sad. Very, very sad. But he was redeemed later. His shade was redeemed, and he helped Malfurion and Tyrande in one of their quest lines.
Do not wake the dreamer.
And, ended up sacrificing himself ultimately. But he did help Malfurion and Tyrande and became known as the Redeemed instead of the Corrupted. Now, like all green dragons, he seems to be able to spew acid all over you. It does seem to be a green dragon thing. Now, like I said, back in Classic WoW, all of those galleries up top contained mini-bosses. I think I read that there were 15 or 16 bosses in this dungeon back in the day, and it was huge. I don't really ever remember doing it. I might have, but if I did, I've blocked it. But I would like to hear stories down below if you actually ran through this dungeon back in Classic or Burning Crusade, because it sounds like it was one heck of a fight. And there he is. Now, the other thing that was interesting is when I was turning in the quests, Ithras mentioned that since all we were fighting was the shade of Arrakis, that most of him was actually still in the Emerald Dream somewhere. Not too sure how that works, but you know, it's always sad to have to put down the dragons. Especially with Dragonflight being out now. Poor dude. That is the other thing he will do if you just stand there and let him jump around and you're hoping that he'll say something. He will put you to sleep. And there we go. The Sunken Temple completed. The Shade of Arrakis, who I probably kept saying his name wrong, but sorry about that, has been dispatched, and all that's left is to go back to Ithras at the entrance and tell him that we did it. Great job, us. I'm so proud of us. This has been a lot of fun, though. Let me know if you liked this with the voiceover, or if you like it better when it's me running through just saying whatever comes to mind as I am doing the dungeon, because I'm up for either. I did have a lot of fun looking up all of the information about the dungeon, because I feel like I got a lot more...
Good luck, friend.
A lot more in-depth than I usually get from just reading the dungeon journal. Especially on a dungeon that I never did back in Classic.
Good luck, friend.
But yeah, hopefully
Till next
you enjoyed this. Hopefully you learned something. I learned a few things. I did learn a lot about the fact that the outside of the Sunken Temple is explorable, and I don't know why I never knew that. So yeah. But thank you as always for watching. Thank you for listening to me babble. Thank you for just being you. And I hope to see you again soon. Oh, that was the
Good
other
luck,
thing.
friend.
Yeah, Icarus doesn't think that we killed Hakkar, and we sure as heck didn't. But yeah, from me, from Onyx, who always looks so cranky. She is definitely the sour sister. But we will see you next week when I do believe we are going to go down into the Blasted Lands, which actually has 2 phased zones. So we'll have to make that one a little bit longer so we can talk about it before Warlords of Draenor and after Warlords of Draenor. But yeah, anyway, from me, from Onyx, have a absolutely fantastic week, and I hope to see you next week for more Exploring Azeroth with Beryl and sometimes Onyx. Have a good week.